I think recently I went from taking the inspiration of the Torah and my religious tradition, I went from taking that inspiration seriously in a good way to perhaps overdoing it, taking it beyond where my rationality, my passion, my sincerity thinks it ought to go. See, it's important to know the ancient prophetic stuff. It's important to know the heavy stuff from all the generations. It's important to take it seriously. It's important to consider its promises, to consider its wisdom, but it has to be judged by you or by whatever version of you think is the truest version. These days, Jews are reading from the books of Moses, the 5 books of Moses, the 5th book, Deuteronomy, and there it says, Ki ha-mitzvah hazos, asher anochi mitzavcha hayom, because the instructions that I'm giving you today, in other words, the Torah, matter of fact, it says right there within a verse, it says, this Torah, keep this Torah, in other words, the 5 books of Moses, or at least that book of Deuteronomy, lo nifleisi mimcha, it's not wondrous to you. And thereafter, after the section I'm going to tell you right now, there's a verse that says that Hanistoros Hashem Elokeinu v'aniglos anu lovneinu ad sofa olam or adol. That the secretive stuff you can leave to God. That's fine. It's only what makes sense to you, what's revealed to you, what's clear to you, that you and your kids need to deal with, need to worry about. So because this that I'm commanding you today, lo nifleisi mimcha. It's not beyond your abilities. V'lo rechokahi, nor is it far away. You don't say, Mi yala lanu hashamayma, who's going to go up to heavens, and then we'll listen to that person. And you don't say, who's going to go me'ever layom, who's going to go for a trip abroad to bring us back this great wisdom. Maybe it's someplace else. But ki karov elecha adavar ma'od, v'ficha u'v'vav chalasoso. It's incredibly close to you. Karov elecha hadavar ma'od. In other words, it can't even be closer. It's at your depth. If you want to find God, it's at your most sincere, at your free from all foreign worships, all irrational worships, all degrading worships, all worships based on fear or hopes that are irrational. Everything that comes from the you that's not the ideal you. That's no good. When you're free from that, the real you, ki karov elecha hadavar ma'od, the matter is incredibly close to you, b'ficha u'v'vav chalas, also in your mouth and in your heart to do it. It's right there. It's in your mouth, inside your mouth. It's inside your heart. It's inside you. Incredible thing. So I was going to go to bed because it is late. I am tired. But I was offended at the lights daring to turn off as if like, oh, you're going to win because the lights are flashing. Fuck that shit. In the Talmud, in the Gemara, there's a story there about, it's an obviously exaggerated story made to sound ridiculous. People who take it literal would be, the people who wrote the story, the sages actually, they'd be like slapping their foreheads. Not you idiots, you idiots. No offense, if you take it serious, maybe it really happened, I don't know, anything's possible. As a matter of fact, I'm going to interrupt myself here for a second to say this is important. What's important in all the things that I say, when they come from the real part of me, the best part of me, and whatever, that's for you to decide as to whether any piece that you're watching seems like it's legit and you should take it seriously or not. Up to you. I ain't speaking to it. Especially because, whatever. But when I am speaking from the best part of me, what matters isn't what I think, but why I think it. Why I believe what I believe, why I think what I think is true, why I understand it. Now, in a simplistic world where people think there's such a thing as beliefs, fuck that shit. Like I put in my video just 2 days ago, the video that I think is called Hallelujah, the 120th World Cometh, or something like that. Like I said in that video, it's about 30 minutes, I think, 38 minutes, something like that. What I said in that video is, I don't have fear. I don't have heresy concepts. I'm not I will, if you say I shouldn't say something, it's so important for me to have freedom of speech, and freedom of thought, and freedom to share that thought. That's what freedom of speech means. Freedom of speech does not mean that I get to show a naked picture of you to the world. It does not mean that I get to shout in your face. That's not speech. What the heck is that? It's not that I get, that if someone can afford $1 billion, they can skywrite their advertisement in the heavens. That's not speech. That's stealing the sky from people. That's messed up. Ditto for billboards and all the stuff that's put in your face without you wanting it to be there. It's that you have the right to think to your own conscience. You have the right to be you, legitimately you, and to share it with anybody who wants to hear it. That's what it means. That's freedom of speech. And that's so essential to me that if you say, don't say this thing, which is a thing that I would never, which is a thing that I think is stupid, stupid, and I would never say it. But when you say, don't say it, I'm going to say it, because that has to be ended. Because freedom of thought is the most important thing, and if you're not allowed to share your thought, you can't trust that you really have the thought. A thought that's not allowed to be shared means that you probably aren't going to have free reign for your thoughts. So that's what matters. What matters is why I think what I think. In other words, whatever I say. If I say something in jest, and you don't know if it's in jest, you don't always know what I mean. If I say sometimes you're supposed to be in a negative mood about something, or portray a negative mood, to feel it, but not like a Weltanschauung of pessimism or anything like that. But it goes with the flow sometimes. Like if somebody is in mourning, in certain situations, it might be right to cry with them. Doesn't mean that you think the whole world is abysmal. It's just that's what's right for that moment. You know what I mean? So same thing with jokes and all the rest. For example, just to say very clearly, when it comes to, let's say, God, it is true when I say I believe in God, I don't believe in God. I love God, I hate God, and I fuck God in the pussy. All of those statements are fair to say. It depends on the context. It depends on which God I'm talking about, right? What does the person mean by God? What do I mean in that moment? And am I being humorous? Am I being right? It's all within context, which is so essential. Now, in order for us to get that through, by the way, in terms of like video and stuff, what matters is not 100% whether you understand someone else, but that you give them the benefit of the doubt. And that you do not play the societal game of Lashon Hara, of evil slander, of judging people unfavorably. You do not play the societal online internet game of communicating negative. No, never. We need to get back face to face a lot more. In any case, back to what I was saying. It's not wondrous to you, this Torah, nor is it in the heavens. So the story from the Talmud. The story in the Talmud is where these rabbis were arguing about some matter. What's the logical way to view some particular aspect of Jewish law, of understanding Jewish law? And one of the rabbis says, well, okay, let me say what the story is intending to show instead of the literal, because a lot of these stories are so colorful that it's like people take them completely literalist, and I would have to spend my time here talking to the literalists and explaining like, hey, you can have reverence for it, and it's good and it's smart, but you're misunderstanding it. You're not having reverence for it, right? It's like you're not having reverence for your father's words if what you're reading is not his actual will. If you're reading an obvious forgery, just because the guy who gave it to you said, hey, this was your dad's will, this was his ethical will, this is what he instructed you that you should, people used to leave ethical wills to their kids. They would say, read this once a week and stuff like that. Well, if you got a fake one, just because the guy who gave it to you said it's true, and maybe, if rationality tells you that it's not true, then you're not revering your father by reading that will instead of the one that he actually left. It's false reverence. It's a show of reverence to yourself and to others. It's completely fake. Anyway, so the story here is about how, this one rabbi, he said, I'm definitely right. And look, there's a sign. These magical things are happening. Like the lights are turning on and off. It's a sign from the Lord. It's a split the Red Sea, right? It's a sign from the Lord that the lights turn on and off, that I shouldn't do a video now. I should just let it be and go to sleep. Maybe I should rethink whether there is definitely what to be said for that. There's what to be said that the Buddhist concept of every once in a while there's a gong smashed so that you rethink things, so that you stop, and only if something is really legitimate and real, and it's not like a thought running in your head like a hamster wheel that you're just continuing because you started thinking it already, but it's legit for now. It's where you want to be. It's what you want to think. only then it sticks beyond the gong. Otherwise, the gong is like a reset. It's a breath of fresh air, and you clear your mind. Let's see where we are now. Who are we today? Who are we this moment? This half hour later. So all the different things that break up Jewish life, whether not just the seventh day, but even just like washing your hands before you eat, is a matter of, which I'm not saying, that's just one aspect, just an example for those Jews who do that, which again is not necessarily what I'm saying what you should do at all. It's just an example of the kind of thing which like it throws a pause into your day. And you're thinking, are my hands clean? From the last meal till now, because every meal basically keeps me alive until the next one, approximately. And so from the last meal till now, did I keep my hands clean? My actions, myself, Now, 100%, there's no question that too much thinking is really, really bad. It depends on the person, but this concept is an important concept. So the rabbi was pointing to these magical signs, like, hey, look, I'm right, because look at all these magical wonders. And the other rabbis said, no. Torah lova shemayim hi. From that verse that I read to you in Deuteronomy, or that I just said to you from Deuteronomy, the Torah is not in heavens. The Torah is not in the heavens. We don't look for signs no more. Superstition is bad. We look at the Torah, just that which is revealed. We look at the Torah and we look at it for ourselves. We received it. We studied it. Now, beficha uvilvavcha. Bilvavcha, in your deepest of hearts, and bilficha, that which comes out of you that you can communicate with others. That be true there. Be true there when it comes to Torah. So, Torah, 5 books of Moses and all the rest. A lot of the videos that I've been doing have been inspirational stuff, have been stuff like I've been looking at the Torah and I didn't explain a lot really, from Final Chance for a Fresh Start. Watch it. There's no point in my explaining it too much until I see a lot of interest. It's like, who am I even talking to? What's their perspective, right? But the stuff that I'm saying, for example, that we're approaching the 120th world. Every world is 50 years. Every civilizational world is 50 years. From the time of metaphorical Adam, we do not all descend from some dude who lived 6,000 years ago and from his wife who came out of his rib, okay? Thank you, please. But from metaphorical Adam until today is, according to the count that we have, actually 5,900 and almost 49 years. We're entering a time period now where it's right before the last, 120 is the number of worlds we get, right before the last 50-year period, which is starting on October 12th, 2024. Shabbos Yom Kippur of 5950, according to the actual count. But all the stuff that I'm saying right there, you have to understand that I'm pointing out the stuff that people don't realize is important from people who do recognize aspects, do understand a lot of things. The Bible is incredibly friggin' important. But at the same time, if you think the Bible is letter for letter from God, you are probably a fool. Or at least thinking something foolish. I'm not saying you're a fool, of course. If you're a fool, there's no reason for me to talk to you whatsoever. I don't care to convince a fool. I really don't. God forbid I should convince a fool. It would mean that I'm a fool too. But it's a foolish thought. It's a foolish thought. The Torah itself never makes that claim. The Bible never makes the claim that it is the Word of God. It never makes that claim. In fact, it very clearly makes a different claim. You have God as a character in the Bible, speaking, saying things. It's a recounting of history, and God is there. And Moses, who, according to many Jews and Christians, their belief is that Moses wrote it at God's, he wrote every single letter. First of all, if he wrote every single letter, how come between the different groups of Jews today we have slightly different Torahs? Not greatly different, but even one letter different is an issue. And we have histories, we have knowledge about the Masoretes of 1,200 years ago, and or 1,300 years ago, and the time of Ezra, even 1,000 years before that. Well, more than 1,000 years before that, some 1,800 years before that. That there was like different versions, slightly with a few letters different here and there, nothing that changes any of the meaning. But if you're stuck with saying every single letter was written by Moses, then I'm not going to care to argue with that now, because it's in this, my theoretical audience is comprised both of people who don't see how you should take the Bible somewhat seriously, and people who take it seriously but wrongly. like the father who didn't leave that will, honoring the fake will, the one that's an insult to your father because he didn't actually write it. Now, with regards to these monotheistic religions, with regards to the Torah and the religions that came out of it, of Christianity and Islam, and also Mandeism for that matter, and to some degree Manichaeism, and various other small groups and all different kinds of Christians and Muslims, etc. And different versions of Jews too, obviously. One really essential aspect of it that's different from the Eastern faiths is that the Eastern faiths are pretty wise. Let's speak for the Indian-based ones, the India-based ones, the Indian-based faiths that came from out of India. I think, interestingly enough, Buddhism, even though it doesn't exist in India today, I mean, everything, it's a huge country. Obviously, everything has made its way back in. Of course, the Dalai Lama is technically in India. But Buddhism was driven completely out of India for a long time. But Buddhism is, at least in the West, most widely known and understood, and clear and more simpler than the many different kinds of Hindu faiths and holy scriptures and whatever else. So even though it really does come from ancient Hinduism, and Hinduism is connected with Jainism and other stuff, it's easier to talk about. And the essential thing there is that it tells you how to live in this world, how to be eudaimonic, how to be, which is an ancient Greek term, means of good daimon, good spirit. How to have a good spirit in this world, stoicism, etc. How to view life as a game and just enjoying it. That's all great. As a matter of fact, in many ways, it's a lot better than monotheistic stuff. Monotheistic stuff, you'll notice, has been a bit less tolerant than the other ones. Granted, the other ones have had their tolerance issues too, and monotheism could be tolerant as well. But monotheism has had its issues with tolerance, in part because monotheism has a goal. There's a goal. There's a world that we came from that was made by this one God, and he's revealed his interest, and there's an end of times. The three great monotheistic religions have that. Again, they all come from the Torah. They all come from this original stuff. But the Torah has obviously not been understood correctly enough by any group of humans, because we have not gotten to the theoretical Eden of old, which we're supposed to hearken back to by eventually coming to it as an entire world. That the whole world will become just one bundle, just like Adam should have been way back when in the Garden of Eden. And eventually Adam's subconscious was transferred onto an outside partner, this theoretical Eve. And that's where romance, it's a long story to explain the Adam and Eve stuff. But the point is that there's a perfection that we're going for. Now here's the essential stuff. Heaven, life eternal, immortality, the afterlife, the resurrection of the dead, the rapture, any sort of thing that's promising you a life beyond this one. That is really built in to the monotheistic religions. It's stated explicitly, of course, in the latest books of the Jewish Bible. The Jewish Bible is what you'd call the Old Testament among Christians. And it's explicit in Christianity and Islam. This future perfection, this end of days, which involves, in fact, people living on in either in some kind of heaven thing or some ethereal plane, or they come back alive physically. It's definitely not explicit in the 5 books of Moses that I've been speaking about: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Bereshis, Shmos, Vayikra, Bamidbar, Dvarim, which can really kind of be divided into 2 things, by the way. The first 4 books starts off, first one starts off Bereshis, in the beginning. The next one says, and these are the names. Third one says, and he called. Fourth one says, and, right? Those are all continuations, one from the other. In other words, they're all really one book. It's just that how big can scrolls be in ancient times. So we call them 4 books. But the 5th one is Elad Dvarim. It stands alone. It doesn't start with an and. It says, these are the words that Moses spoke. It's like a separate book, and it's regarded within itself as a separate book. Mishneh Torah is what it's called. A repetition of the Torah. A secondary Torah, another version of the Torah, a secondary version of the Torah. And I do want to read some of that, actually, but we'll need anyways. Give me a second. Yeah, I lost my place there for a second. So this afterlife stuff definitely does not appear in the first 5 books, in the books of Moses, what's considered the Torah, as in contrast to the rest of the Old Testament, which is not called Torah. It's called the prophets and the writings. Those are 2 latter sections, which are the Bible, but nonetheless of much less importance than the Torah. Torah is Torah Moshe, it stands alone. The Torah of Moshe, the Bible, that's the essence of the Jewish Bible, the 5 books of Moses. As a matter of fact, the Samaritans, which is a tiny, tiny group left over, a tiny group that divided from the rest of the Jewish people way back when. They might not have ever even been 100% connected with Judeans. They might have been a separate kingdom from the time of Saul, from the time of, from possibly, they claim, from the time of Eli or before Eli. Anyway, I don't want to get into, but the point is, this group goes back around 3,000 years. Approximately 3,000 years they have been separate. They only hold the 5 books of Moses as sacred. As absolutely sacred, only the 5 books of Moses, which they have as well. There are slight differences, but nothing that really matters. Just very, very, very slight differences. Only thing that matters somewhat is that it explicitly gives a certain location other than Jerusalem as the holy site. That's it. Really not a very major big deal other than for the matter of Jerusalem, which is itself a big deal, but way, 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 way down the line of importance. Jerusalem itself, of course, is not mentioned in the 5 books of Moses either. Anyways, so this afterlife stuff, I'm sorry to say, but there's really no logic for it that I can see. Again, I'm all for it, and I would love if people will step in and do the parts that I cannot do because of my ADHD-ness, which is a horrible term that I reject 100%. What I am is a tremendous blessing for me, and I think for people who know me or who listen to me at times. But it does not fit well with being able to make anything in this world happen. So if other people end up stepping in and I have some kind of voice, that would be great. And at that point, I can do on a larger scale what I've done my whole life, which is to talk honestly and sincerely with people from around the world who claim that they have special knowledge about something, and to hear them out and see if it makes sense. And so far, I have looked more than most people. Not that I've been searching and looking and expecting, because you have to be rational, And once you find like, oh, there's no necessary basis for that, and this, you start to learn like, yeah, this person makes the same mistake that the other one made, and at the end of the day, it's unfortunately, there's very, very little to be said for some kind of afterlife. Ultimately, at the end of the day, the Buddhists, with their perspective of don't take life too seriously, be detached, and just laugh, and like Dalai Lama, you can find videos of him from when he was way, 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 way younger, when he was kicked out of Tibet by the Chinese, and he's already just doing that endless laughing thing that he does today. That sort of not thinking about the future thing. Of course, the Dalai Lama's thing has a heaven too, because Buddhism eventually, of course, became less pure, because same reason that the 5 books of Moses didn't have a heaven, but later on a heaven shows up. Because people like that idea of a heaven or an afterlife coming back to, it keeps people in line for the most part. It keeps people in line, especially it allows the religious leaders to explain that things are unfair, yes, and we are siding with the kings to keep things unfair, but don't worry, there's a heaven if you just follow the rules. The thing is, my friends, that, and this is the tragedy, we're so fucking close to possibly being able to have immortality. That's what the religious monotheism pushes for. To get to a point of immortality, as you've probably seen at least some science fiction stuff, or read some science fiction stuff, or you're familiar with Arthur Kurzweil or other longevity people, or you're familiar with the idea of the singularity. There's many, you saw San Junipero from Black Mirror. There's many different little versions of how to get to an immortality. They're all, people are always focusing on the science fiction stuff is always about how things go wrong. Like Spock is, I don't know from Star Trek things, but somebody would be beamed somewhere or other, and somehow the original person was still there, even though, so there was like 2 of them. It's focusing nonsense. And in large part, what that serves to do is to keep people from actually taking it seriously, instead of falling back on ridiculous concepts of life after death and rapture and whatever. Great, I'd love to hear that. And if I have a larger audience and I can bring people on to, who can make the best argument, that I can actually speak with them instead of just hearing what they have to say on Joe Rogan, let's say, Sadhguru or great rabbis. And among rabbis, I've spoken to the greatest of them from the previous generation. That's what I did. And I've investigated and whatever else, and I do not see the rationality for it. I'm sorry to say. But we can and ought to, the same way as I like to spend some time to take seriously people who claim they can prove some kind of, religious truth that I'm not yet familiar with or I'm not convinced of. That'd be fantastic. And to do it all very publicly, to have a podcast here, which again, I need you to set up. I can't, it's not what I am. I know I look like a